The cold wind blew through the open market, cutting through skin like knives. The sky was dark, filled with clouds and smoke. Neon lights flickered above rusty metal signs, and a crowd gathered near the edge of the pit. It was the bidding pit, a place where slaves, junk, and broken lives were sold for scraps. Tonight, a new item was up for sale, and nobody cared. A drunk alien with one eye and a belly too big for his vest stood on a broken crate, yelling into a crackling speaker. Next up, worthless junk, found frozen near the river. Make your bids, or move on. He waved his hand, and two guards dragged something forward. No, someone. It was a girl, thin as a bone, wrapped in chains. Her skin was pale blue, covered in dirt and blood. Her eyes were shut, lips cracked, body shaking like a leaf in the cold. She didn't move, didn't speak. The crowd laughed. What is that? A corpse? 2 credits says she dies before morning. Not worth a single chip. Give her to the scrapyard. The auctioneer raised his hands, trying to calm the noise. Now, someone must need a helper. Or entertainment. He smirked. The crowd booed louder, throwing empty cans and scraps at the crate. Still, one figure didn't move. He stood in the back, leaning against a broken pole. Wrapped in a torn coat, a human with messy brown hair, dirt on his face, and tired eyes. He had nothing. No home, no money, no reason to be here. Yet his eyes were fixed on the girl in chains. Fine. The auctioneer shouted, "Let's make it interesting." He grabbed a bottle of liquor from under his coat, lifted it high. 1 bottle. Anyone want her for just this? The crowd roared with laughter, shaking their heads to bottles. The alien barked, and a shopping cart. Metal wheels still work. Now, who wants her? No one stepped forward. Not one person raised a hand. The girl's head fell to the side, a tear slipping down her cheek. Her lips moved, but no sound came. That's when the human moved. He walked slowly, pulling something behind him, a metal cart with 1 wobbly wheel, and 2 half-empty bottles inside. The crowd fell silent. The auctioneer blinked, confused. You're offering that? The human nodded, his voice calm, low, but clear. She's mine now. The crowd burst into noise. Is he serious? He's mad. She's cursed. But the human ignored them. He stepped onto the platform, knelt beside the girl, and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched, but didn't pull away. With care, he unhooked the chains and wrapped her in his coat. He picked her up like something fragile and placed her in the cart. The auctioneer hesitated, then grabbed the bottles, sniffed them, and shrugged. Deal's a deal. She's all yours. Freak, as the human began pushing the cart away. The wind grew stronger. Snow started to fall, soft, then heavy. The crowd faded behind him, their laughter echoing into the night. He didn't look back, not once. The girl opened her eyes for a second, just a crack. She saw his face, tired, but kind. Her lips trembled as she whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He just kept pushing the cart down the broken street, through the falling snow. Then, softly, he said, "No one is worthless, and in the silent city filled with shadows." The cart disappeared into the night behind them. The bidding pit closed for the night. But something had already changed. Something small, something dangerous. Because the man who bought her had nothing to give, except everything. The cart's squeaky wheel echoed through the narrow alleys, trash piled high on both sides, metal and plastic clinking in the wind. The snow fell harder now, covering everything in a soft white blanket. The human pushed forward, step by step, boots crunching in the frozen slush. The girl inside the cart didn't speak again, but her eyes blinked slowly. Still watching him, her fingers were stiff. Her skin still freezing, but she could feel the warmth of his coat wrapped around her. Each time the cart jolted, she winced in pain, but didn't cry out. She was used to pain. What she wasn't used to was kindness. The human didn't talk much. He just muttered directions to himself. Turning left here, avoiding patrols there. He glanced down at her now and then, checking if she was still breathing. Her eyes met his once, and for a moment, time stopped. She expected him to look at her like others did, with disgust, or pity, or hunger. But he didn't. He just nodded, like he was saying, "I see you." They reached a rusty gate half hidden behind an old dumpster. The human kicked it open with his boot, the hinges screaming like metal beasts. Inside was an abandoned repair station, half roof. Broken lights, shattered screens. But it was shelter. It was his home. He wheeled the cart inside and carefully lifted her out. She was light, too light, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in weeks. He placed her on a padded bench made from a stripped-down Star Cruiser seat. Then, without saying a word, he lit a small heater using wires and scrap fuel. The flames danced gently, casting orange light on her face. She shivered, eyes wide, staring at the heater like it was magic. The warmth touched her skin, and a tear slipped down her cheek. He noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he walked over to a crate, opened it, and pulled out a metal cup. He poured hot broth into it. Not much. Just enough. He held it out to her, carefully. She looked at it with suspicion, then at him. Was it a trick? Was it poison? Was this where the pain would begin? But he just waited, quiet, patient. So she reached out, her fingers shaking, and took the cup. She sipped, and for the first time in weeks, something warm slid down her throat. Better. He asked gently. She didn't answer, but her grip on the cup tightened. That was enough for him. Hours passed, slow and quiet. The storm outside raged. But inside, the shelter was calm. She finished the broth, then leaned back against the seat, her eyes drifting shut. But her mind wouldn't rest. Why? She whispered again, voice hoarse. The human looked up from where he was fixing a cracked light panel. Why, what? He asked, "Why did you buy me?" She asked, her voice shaking. He paused, then set the tool down, walking over slowly. "Because no one else did," he said. "And no one should be left in the cold." She stared at him, confused. "You don't want to? Use me." The human shook his head, almost offended. "No," he said firmly. "I just wanted you to be safe." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She had been called property, trash, a toy. Never safe, never someone. He sat down across from her, arms resting on his knees. "I don't have much," he admitted. "No money, no ship, no name worth saying. But I know what it's like to be thrown away. So when I saw you there, freezing and alone, I just couldn't walk past." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of thoughts, pain, confusion, and something else. Hope. A strange new thing she wasn't sure she could trust. "What's your name?" She asked softly. He smiled for the first time, a small, tired smile. "Call me Jace," he said. She looked down, then whispered, "My name." "Was Vela Vela?" he repeated, like it was something special, like it mattered. The storm outside began to die, but the fire inside the shelter burned steady. Vela's eyes slowly closed, and for the first time in her life, she fell asleep without fear, and Jace stayed nearby, watching over her, guarding her like something precious. Because even though she was sold for liquor and a cart to him, she was priceless. The next morning came with gray skies and silence. Snow had piled up against the broken walls of the old repair station. Inside, the shelter was still cold, but not deadly. The small fire had burned through the night, and Jace had stayed awake, watching Vela breathe. Every time she twitched or moaned in her sleep, His hand tightened on the metal rod he kept beside him, just in case, when her eyes finally opened. They were clearer than before, still tired. Still scared, but not empty. She looked around slowly, taking in the strange place. The ceiling was patched with metal sheets, cables hung like vines, and broken droids lined the walls like sleeping statues to most people. It would look like a trash heap, but to her, it looked like peace. Jace stood near a corner. Working on a busted heater coil, sparks flew as he adjusted the wires with a tool made from scrap and copper. He noticed her watching and gave a small nod. "Morning," he said. "How's the pain?" She sat up slowly, surprised that she could. Her body ached. But it was the kind of pain that meant healing. "Better," she whispered. "Still hurts, but better." He smiled a little, wiped his hands on his coat, and walked over. "Here," he said, handing her a rough cloth pouch. "Food paste, tastes like rubber, but it'll help." She took it, hesitant, then nodded her thanks as she ate. She looked around more carefully. Everything in this shelter was old, broken, or half-finished, but Jace had arranged it with care. A small bedroll in one corner, a water filter made from melted parts, a hand-cranked generator. There was no luxury. But there was effort. Effort someone poor had made to survive. She respected that. "You built all this?" she asked, voice weak but curious. Jace shrugged, sitting on an upside-down crate. "Bit by bit," he said. "Found pieces in the dump, traded wires for food, worked odd jobs. Never had a place of my own until I fixed this one." She studied him, his rough hands, his tired eyes, his simple words. He wasn't rich, wasn't powerful. But he had done something no one else did. He saw value in things everyone else threw away, including her. "Why are you alone?" she asked, the words slipping out. Jace looked away, then let out a long breath. "War happened," he said. "Lost people. Lost things. Didn't want to be part of the system anymore. Didn't want to hurt anyone again. I came to this broken moon to disappear." Vela nodded. Silent, she didn't need details. She understood what it meant to be broken by life. She leaned back, closed her eyes for a moment, then said softly, "Me too." Hours passed. Slow and gentle, Jace showed her how to warm her hands over the engine coil without burning. He let her sit by the solar light and gave her his only blanket. And slowly, Vela began to speak more. Not about the past, not yet, but about small things. The stars she liked, the foods she remembered, the music that made her feel safe. Jace listened, never pushing her for more. That night, she noticed something strange while he was out collecting firewood. She explored a small cabinet in the corner. Inside, she found old data pads, damaged but still glowing. She opened one and saw sketches, drawings of parts, repair notes, blueprints, and among them, faces. One was a woman, human, smiling, with dark hair. Another was a little boy, laughing, holding a model ship. She stared at them, something tightening in her chest. These were not just memories, they were reasons. Jace had lost people, people he loved. Now it made sense why he couldn't leave her behind in that pit, because once, someone had left him too. When Jace returned, he saw her holding the pad. He didn't get angry, didn't shout. He just sat down beside her and said, "That was my wife and son, killed when the compound collapsed in the war." Vela didn't speak, but she reached out and gently placed her hand on his. They sat in silence, the fire crackling nearby. Outside, the storm began again, but inside the junk shelter, something new had started, something fragile. A bond not of blood, not of debt, but of understanding. In that moment, Vela realized something. She had been sold like trash, bought for 2 bottles and a cart. But in this world of broken machines and lonely people, She had landed in the one place where broken things were repaired, not discarded. Asterisk the heater hummed softly as sparks danced in the corner. Vila sat on a low bench, trying to clean her arms with a wet cloth. The bruises were fading slowly. Her strength returning, her eyes were clearer now. Voice a little stronger, but she still avoided mirrors. Still flinched at sudden sounds, she had lived in fear too long to forget it in a few nights. Jace was working again, hands deep inside a broken drone. The small flying bot had a cracked eye lens and torn wiring. He was trying to bring it back to life, just like everything else here. Vila watched him for a moment, her eyes soft. "Why do you fix broken things?" she asked. Jace looked up, smiling faintly. "Because it's better than throwing them away," he said. She nodded, then looked down at her hands. "I wish someone had fixed me sooner," she whispered. There was a long silence after that. Not heavy, just real. Then, quietly, she stood up and pulled her shirt halfway up her back, I think. "Something's wrong here," she said, her voice shaking. "Can you look?" Jace blinked, stood up, and slowly stepped behind her. He saw it the moment the fabric moved. A deep scar ran across her shoulder blades, jagged and old. But next to it was something stranger, a black symbol, glowing faintly under her skin. Shaped like a diamond with wings, it pulsed every few seconds, not with blood, but with energy. "What is this?" he murmured. He leaned in closer, brushing aside some dirt with a cloth. The mark didn't rub off, didn't fade. It was embedded, like it had been placed there on purpose by technology far beyond common use. He grabbed his scanner, an old tool held together by wires and lock. He ran it over the mark, expecting nothing. But the scanner beeped once, then stopped. The screen flashed red and displayed words he hadn't seen in years. "Royal signature detected, priority code. ZARX-19 access restricted." Jace's breath caught in his throat. He stepped back, stunned. "What does it say?" Vila asked, turning around quickly. Her eyes wide, Jace stared at her, mouth slightly open. "Vila?" "That's not a slave brand," he said slowly. "That's a royal emblem. Ancient tech, sealed code." She shook her head, confused. "No. I was just a servant." "They said I was nothing." He stepped closer. Showing her the scanner screen, "Someone lied," he said, voice tense. "You're not nothing. You're someone they wanted hidden." She stared at the glowing mark, her hands trembling. "But why? Why mark me like that if they wanted to sell me like junk?" Jace's mind raced. He'd seen codes like this during the war. Hidden under layers of skin, protecting VIPs or royal targets. Sometimes, when a planet fell, powerful families hid their children among refugees, covering them in dirt and silence. Some were found, some were forgotten. "You were never supposed to be found," he whispered. "You were supposed to disappear outside." Something buzzed in the air, faint, distant. A tiny red light flickered above the shelter roof, then vanished. Neither of them saw it, not yet. Vila sat down slowly, her body shaking. "I don't remember anything. Just flashes. A woman crying, someone pushing me into a pod. Then pain, cold, chains." Jace sat beside her. Hand on her shoulder. "They didn't want you dead," he said. "They wanted you erased." That night, the mood in the shelter changed. It wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about secrets, deep ones, dangerous ones. Jace sealed the windows tighter, covered the door with scrap metal. He knew what a royal signature meant. It meant trackers, bounty hunters. Or worse, governments that killed to protect silence. Vela couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. For so long she believed she was trash. A slave, something to be owned. But now, the idea that she might be important terrified her more than the chains did. Jay stayed up too, checking the perimeter with his old drone scanner. The sky looked calm, but he knew better. Too much silence was never safe. As the early hours of morning crept in, Vila spoke again. "If they come for me, what will you do?" she asked. Jace looked at her for a long time, then replied, "They'll have to get through me first." And in that quiet moment, between fear and firelight, something unbreakable formed. Not armor, not weapons, but a promise. The fog came thick and low, crawling like a living thing through the junk alleys. It slid beneath broken fences and curled around rusted machines. The morning light had no strength here, hidden behind clouds and ash inside the shelter. The heater was off, the fire out. Jace crouched in silence. Watching the scanner with narrowed eyes, the old drone monitor blinked once. Then again, movement just beyond the southern wall. He tapped the screen, zoomed in, a flicker. Maybe a cloak, maybe nothing. But his gut told him the truth. Someone had found them. Vila sat in the shadows behind him, knees pulled to her chest. She could feel it too, the shift in the air. The pressure, the fear. Her hands clenched the blanket. Not because she was cold, but because she wasn't sure what would happen next. Jace grabbed a small metal box from under the bench. Flipped it open. Inside were parts for traps. Old grenades, smoke canisters, and 2 makeshift blasters. He tossed one to Vila, who caught it awkwardly. "I don't know how to shoot," she whispered. "You'll learn fast," he replied. They didn't speak after that. Jace moved quietly through the shelter, setting up motion triggers, checking the back exit. Vila followed, trying to stay low, trying not to shake. Every shadow outside felt like it was watching. Every creak of metal sounded like a step, then a soft thunk. A small red light blinked near the door. The tripwire had caught something. Jace signaled to Vela stay. He moved toward the front, silent as a shadow, peering through a crack in the wall. He saw them, 3 figures, tall and wrapped in silver cloaks. Their faces hidden, their boots made no sound. And their weapons were long, sharp, and glowing blue. They didn't look like local thieves. They looked like professionals, trackers. One of them crouched, touching the ground near the gate. He lifted a scanner, and a light swept across the dirt. Jace cursed under his breath. They were sniffing for biosigns, and they were getting close. He stepped back, turned to Vela. "We have 10 minutes, maybe less," he said. "We have to leave." Vela stood, pale but ready. "Where can we go?" "There's a smuggler tunnel beneath the east wall," he said. "I never used it too risky, but now we don't have a choice." They moved quickly, gathering only what they needed: food, energy packs, 2 blankets, 1 medkit. As Jace opened the hidden floor panel, a blast shook the front wall. The door groaned, metal bending inward. "They're coming in," Vela whispered, heart racing. Jace pulled her down into the dark crawl space, slamming the hatch shut above them. They crawled on hands and knees through dust and wires. Behind them, the shelter above shook again. Another blast, followed by footsteps, heavy, slow. And to calm the kind of walk made by people who knew their target couldn't run far. The tunnel opened into a long pipe that led toward the outer edge of the junk fields. Jace helped Vila climb up, then followed as they emerged. They heard the shouts behind them. "They're not here. Scan for heat signatures. Find the girl." Jace didn't wait. He grabbed Vila's hand and ran, through the thick fog, over frozen metal and garbage piles. The sound of alarms grew distant behind them, but Jace knew they weren't safe yet. Vela stumbled, but kept going. Her legs were still weak. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not when someone had just risked everything to protect her. They ducked into an old shuttle husk, half buried in the ground. Jace sealed the door with metal rods. Breathing heavy, they were safe, for now. But Vila's body collapsed beside him, exhausted, shaking from the cold and fear. He wrapped the blanket around her, then sat beside her in silence. I heard them say your name," she whispered. "They were looking for me." "But they knew you too." Jace didn't look at her. He just stared into the fog beyond the broken glass window. "They know who I am because I used to be one of them," he said. "I used to work for the people who erase others, the ones who leave girls like you in cages." Vila's eyes widened. "Then why did you save me?" she asked. His voice was soft, tired, "Because I didn't want to be one of them anymore, and because maybe saving you was the only good thing I had left to do outside." The fog began to lift, but the real storm was just beginning. The hunters knew she was alive now, and they wouldn't stop. But Vila wasn't the same helpless girl in chains anymore. And Jace wasn't just a broken man in a junkyard. Together, they were something new. A target. Yes, but also a spark. Jace stared out the cracked shuttle window as the fog began to thin. He could hear the hum of engines, distant but getting closer, above them. Dark shapes moved between the clouds, drones or worse. He knew what that meant. They weren't just sending scouts anymore. They were sending hunters to finish the job. Vila sat on the cold metal floor, wrapped in the blanket. Her fingers curled tightly around the blaster Jace gave her. Her eyes weren't soft anymore. They burned with something new. Fear. Yes, but also fire. She had been hunted, chained, silenced. Now, she was ready to run no more. "We can't stay here," Jace said quietly. "They'll track the tunnel exit." Vela nodded. Standing up slowly. "Then we fight," she said. Her voice clear. Jace looked at her, surprised. "But proud? You sure you're ready?" "No," she said. "But I'm done hiding." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver cube. A trigger. Attached to it was a homemade explosive buried back at the shelter. It was meant for emergencies. Now, it would buy them time. He held the cube tightly. Then whispered, "Goodbye, home," with one press. The signal was sent. A moment later, the sky lit up with fire. The old shelter exploded in a storm of metal and smoke. The ground shook, alarms blared, and a black cloud rose into the sky. Jace and Vila turned away and started running through the junk fields. Behind them, chaos spread, confused drones. Shouting voices, searching eyes. Every step was painful. Every breath short, but they moved fast, zigzagging between wrecked ships and broken towers. They had one goal: reach the outer wall and escape into the canyon beyond. They slid down a slope made of shattered solar panels. A patrol bot spotted them, red lights flashing, and fired. Jace spun around and shot back, the blast hitting the bot sensor. It spun wildly and crashed into the rubble. Vela ducked behind him, then took aim at a second drone. Her hands shook, but she focused, pulled the trigger. The bolt struck the drone's wing and sent it spinning into a tower wall. She stared at her hands, surprised. "I hit it." "I actually hit it," Jace smiled, "even in the middle of battle. Told you'd learn fast." They kept moving, ducking under collapsed bridges, stepping over old bones and scrap, everywhere they turned. The world reminded them of what it used to be and what it had become. This moon had once been alive, a hub of trade and peace. Now it was ruins, just like Vila, but even ruins could hold power. They reached the edge of the junk zone, and in front of them stood the outer security wall, 30 feet high. Made of metal and energy grids, it was cracked in places, but not broken. Beyond it lay the wild canyons, dangerous. Unguarded, but free. There, Jace pointed. "That service tunnel, under the tower, but it's locked," Vela said. "Not for long," he replied, pulling out his tools. As he worked to bypass the panel, Vila kept watch. Her heart pounded in her chest as she saw 3 shadowy figures approaching from the smoke behind. "They're coming," she whispered. Fast, Jace didn't look up, his hands steady. Just a few more seconds, the lock sparked once, twice, then clicked open. Got it. Go. Vela dove inside first, sliding into the narrow tunnel. Jace followed and sealed the hatch behind them. But before he could lock it completely, a hand grabbed his coat from outside. One of the hunters had reached them, face hidden behind a metal mask. Voice low and robotic. "Give us the girl," it growled. "And you can leave alive." Jace didn't answer with words. He answered with a punch. The hunter stumbled, and Jace slammed the hatch shut, locking it tight. He turned and followed Vela deeper into the tunnel, both of them breathing hard. The tunnel opened into a dark cave beneath the canyon. Old lights flickered, and a cold wind whispered through the stone walls. Jace leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Vela stood in the middle of the space, hands on her knees, shaking, but not from weakness. From adrenaline, from being alive. She looked up at him, eyes wet but shining. "You didn't have to fight," she said. "You could have left me." Jace met her gaze. "No," he said. "Freedom has a price. And today? I paid it with fire." Vela stepped closer. "I want to fight now," she said. Her voice calm. "I want to stop running. I want to make them pay for what they did. Not just to me, but to others like me." Jace nodded slowly. "Then we start here," he said, not as prey, but as something they never expected. Vela looked out toward the rising sun. Beyond the canyon lay danger, yes, but also freedom. And this time, she would choose her path. The wind howled through the canyon like a wounded beast. Dust rose with every step they took, stinging their eyes. Vela walked ahead. Wrapped in the thick blanket, her head held higher than before. Jace followed behind, scanning the rocks. His blaster ready. They were tired, bruised, and running low on supplies, but they were alive. And more than that, they were free. Each step away from the junk fields felt like cutting a chain loose. Each mile carried them farther from the people who had tried to bury her, and yet, deep inside, Vela knew. This wasn't over. She could feel it, the pull of something larger. Like a storm waiting to break, she didn't know who she truly was yet. But something inside her had changed. They found shelter in an old communications tower. Half sunk into the canyon wall, it had power, a few working consoles, and a high view of the skies. Jace patched into a satellite relay, hoping to find news, warnings, or maybe hope. The screen flickered to life, then showed something neither of them expected. A broadcast grainy, full of static, but clear enough to understand. A royal symbol flashed across the screen. Then a voice, smooth and official, filled the room. "This is a public alert from the House of Zarex-19, a stolen royal heir. Long thought dead has been located. The girl bears the mark and carries classified genetic coding. Her return is vital to the restoration of our people. Anyone aiding her will be considered a traitor." The message repeated over and over. Vela stared at the screen. Her heart pounding, she stepped back, shaking her head. "They want me back," she whispered. "Not because they care, but because I'm useful again." Jace turned to her, eyes filled with fire. "Then let's give them something they never expected." He tapped the console, accessed the CUM frequency, and opened a public line. His voice, tired but strong, echoed across the relay systems. "To the House of Zarex-19, she's not yours. You sold her like trash. Left her to rot. She's not coming back in chains." Vela stepped beside him, looked straight into the camera. Her voice was steady, no longer small. "You called me worthless," she said. "You traded me for bottles and a cart. But this human, the one you called dirt, gave me warmth, food and hope. I am not your property. I am not your tool. I belong to no one, but I choose to walk with him." The screen went black. Transmission ended. Jay sat back and let out a long breath. Well, he said, if they weren't chasing us before. They definitely are, now, Vila laughed. Not from joy, but from freedom. It felt good to speak, to be heard. For the first time in her life, her voice mattered. They stayed in the tower for the night, watching the skies, and in the early hours of morning, something moved in the distance. A ship, not a war vessel, not a hunter drone. It shimmered in gold and silver, descending slowly through the clouds. Jace grabbed his blaster, ready to run. But Vela placed her hand on his. Wait, she said. This one feels different. The ship landed gently on the stone. A ramp opened, and from it stepped a woman with skin like polished bronze, eyes glowing softly. She wore no weapons, only robes marked with the same symbol that burned on Vila's back, but instead of anger, her face held sorrow. You bear the mark, the woman said. Kneeling before Vela, I am your mother's sister. She died trying to protect you. They told us you were lost. They erased all records. They hid the truth. Vila froze, her lips trembling. My mother? The woman nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She was the queen, and you are the last heir. Jace stepped forward, pulling Vela behind him. She's not going anywhere unless she chooses it, he said. The woman looked at him with deep respect. You saved her when all others abandoned her, she said. I offer no chains, no orders, only a choice. Vela looked at Jace. Then back at the woman. She took a long breath, then spoke. I will come, she said, but only if he comes with me. The woman bowed. Then so be it. And just like that, the girl once sold for 2 bottles and a cart became more than anyone imagined. Not because of her blood or her birth, but because of the man who saw her as more than broken. Because of kindness, courage, and something greater than royalty, humanity. As the ship rose into the sky, Jace sat beside her. Eyes wide at the stars above, Vila leaned her head on his shoulder. Smiling gently, she had been nothing. Now, she was everything. And she would never forget the man who gave her that chance. Not with money, not with power, but with heart.